In the cold silence of space, a shadow fell over Earth. It started as a faint glimmer on the edge of the solar system, something astronomers dismissed as a comet or an asteroid at first. But soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. Massive ships, each one larger than any city on Earth, emerged from the darkness. They moved with precision, their sleek metallic surfaces reflecting the light of the distant sun. These were no explorers. This was an invasion. The people of Earth watched in stunned silence as the fleet approached. News channels scrambled to cover the event, and social media erupted with panic, speculation, and prayers. Governments called emergency meetings, but no one knew what to do. The ship stopped just outside Earth's atmosphere, hovering ominously like predators circling their prey. Then, a single vessel descended, breaking through the clouds and landing in the heart of New York City. Its arrival sent shockwaves through the streets, shattering windows and knocking people off their feet. From the ship emerged a figure unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Tall and imposing, with skin that shimmered like molten metal, Commander Zirk stepped forward. His voice boomed, not from his mouth but seemingly from everywhere at once, amplified by technology far beyond human understanding. "We are the Volctor Dominion," he declared. "You will kneel before us, or you will burn." Daniel Carter sat alone in his small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, staring at the live broadcast on his screen. He wasn't surprised by the arrival of aliens. He'd always believed it was inevitable. But he was surprised by how unprepared humanity seemed. For years, Daniel had tried to warn anyone who would listen about the dangers lurking beyond Earth's borders. But after losing his wife and son during a failed colonization mission, he retreated from public life, burying himself in books and solitude. His quiet evening was interrupted when someone knocked on his door. Reluctantly, he opened it to find Laura Bennett standing there. She was a journalist he vaguely recognized from local news segments, her bright green coat making her stand out against the drab hallway. "Mr. Carter," she said, breathless, "I need your help." Daniel frowned. "I'm nobody. Just leave me alone." "No," Laura insisted, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "You're not nobody. You were part of Project Horizon, the team that designed weapons used in the Eridani conflict. People say you know more about fighting wars in space than anyone else alive." "That was years ago," Daniel muttered, turning away. "And look where it got us. Half our colonies destroyed, billions dead. But now we're facing another war," Laura pressed. "And if we don't fight back, this time it won't just be colonies. It'll be Earth itself. Everyone knows the stories of what humans did to those who attacked them before. Whole planets burned to ashes. If we can use that reputation—" "It's not a reputation," Daniel snapped, his voice sharp. "It's a warning. We didn't destroy those worlds because we wanted to. We did it because we had no choice. Do you think I wanted to design weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations? I didn't, but sometimes survival means doing things you hate." Laura hesitated, then softened her tone. "That's why I came to you, because you understand what's at stake. If we surrender now, we lose everything. But if we fight, maybe, just maybe, we have a chance." For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. He stared at the floor, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him again, the same burden he thought he'd left behind. Finally, he sighed. "All right, I'll help, but don't expect miracles." As they left the apartment together, neither of them noticed the dark shape of a drone hovering outside the window, recording their every move. Daniel and Laura drove through the empty streets of Chicago, heading toward an old military archive hidden beneath the city. The sky was dark, not just from the late hour, but also from the looming alien ships that blocked out the stars. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he replayed memories he'd rather forget. Memories of battles fought and lost, of worlds reduced to ash. Laura sat quietly beside him, her notebook clutched in her lap, unsure if she should break the silence. Finally, she spoke. You said earlier that humanity didn't destroy those planets because we wanted to. What did you mean? Daniel sighed, his eyes fixed on the road. It started with the Eridani conflict. They attacked first, thinking we were weak because we hadn't expanded far beyond our own solar system. We weren't prepared for war, but when they hit us, we adapted. Fast. Laura nodded, scribbling notes. I've read about it, but most of the records are classified. People only know the basics. The human fleets retaliated, and after years of fighting, entire Eridani colonies were wiped out. It wasn't just retaliation, Daniel said bitterly. It was survival. Every time we tried to negotiate, they destroyed more of our outposts. So we built weapons designed to make sure no one would ever threaten us again. When they refused to back down, we used them. Planets burned, yes, but it wasn't because we enjoyed it. It was because we had no other choice. Laura frowned. Do you think these aliens, the Vokter, know about that? About what happened to the Eridani? They must, Daniel replied. Anyone who studied galactic history knows. But maybe they don't care, or maybe they think we're bluffing. Either way, they've made a mistake coming here. The car pulled into a crumbling parking garage near the old Loop district. They got out and walked to a rusted metal door, partially hidden behind graffiti-covered walls. Daniel tapped a code into a keypad, and the door creaked open, revealing a staircase leading downward. Laura followed him into the dimly lit underground archive, where rows of dusty shelves held documents and data chips from decades past. As they searched for information, Laura found herself drawn to a stack of personal journals written by soldiers who had fought in the Eridani conflict. One entry caught her eye. Asterisk, we didn't ask for this war, but now that it's here, we can't afford to lose. If we fall, everything we've built falls with us. Asterisk, she felt a chill run down her spine. These words, written so long ago, felt eerily relevant today. Meanwhile, Daniel uncovered blueprints for an experimental weapon called Solstice. He spread the papers across a table, explaining its purpose to Laura. This was supposed to be our ultimate defense, a device capable of harnessing energy from the sun and releasing it as a concentrated beam. It could destroy entire fleets or even planets if needed, but it was never finished. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. Laura glanced at him sharply. Do you think we could finish it? Now, I mean. It's possible, Daniel admitted, but building it would take time, resources, and people willing to risk everything. And even then, there's no guarantee it would work, or that using it wouldn't kill us all. Before Laura could respond, a loud noise echoed through the archive. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Someone else was down there with them. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and motioned for Laura to stay quiet. They crept toward the source of the sound, hearts pounding. As they turned a corner, they came face to face with a group of armed men in military uniforms. One of the men stepped forward, lowering his weapon slightly. Daniel Carter, he asked gruffly. General Hale sent us. He wants to see you. Daniel exchanged a wary look with Laura. General Marcus Hale was a legend, a man who had commanded Earth's forces during the Eridani conflict. If he was involved, things were about to get much more complicated. Reluctantly, Daniel nodded. All right, take us to him. As they were led deeper into the underground complex, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than either of them had anticipated. Whatever was coming next, it was clear that humanity's fate hung in the balance, and Daniel's knowledge might be the key to tipping the scales. The group led Daniel and Laura through a maze of dark corridors until they reached a large, reinforced door. It slid open with a hiss, revealing a brightly lit room filled with monitors, maps, and soldiers working tirelessly. At the center of it all stood General Marcus Hale, an aging but imposing figure with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce right through anyone who met his gaze. His uniform was worn, its badges dulled by time, but there was no mistaking the authority he carried. Carter, Hale said, his voice gravelly but firm. I didn't expect to see you again. Daniel stepped forward cautiously. General Hale, I thought you were retired. I was, Hale replied, gesturing for them to come closer. But retirement doesn't last long when aliens park their ships in our skies. You've seen what's happening out there. Daniel nodded. They're not here to negotiate. They want us to surrender or die. Hale's jaw tightened. That's what I figured, which is why we need your help. We've been digging into old files, trying to find anything that might give us an edge against these. Voktar. Imagine my surprise when I found records of something called Solstice. Laura glanced at Daniel, who looked uneasy. It's unfinished, Daniel said quickly. And dangerous. Even if we could build it, using it might destroy us as much as them. We don't have a choice, Hale shot back. Earth isn't ready for this fight. Our defenses are outdated, our fleet is scattered across the galaxy, and morale is already crumbling. If we don't show the Voktar we're willing to hit back hard, they'll crush us without hesitation. Laura spoke up, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. What about diplomacy? Couldn't we try talking to them? Maybe find common ground. Hale gave her a grim smile. Miss Bennett, she supplied. Laura Bennett. Miss Bennett. Hale continued. The Voktar don't care about talk. Their empire thrives on fear and domination. They've conquered dozens of species, wiping out those who resist. If we kneel, they'll strip us of everything. Our freedom, our resources, our dignity. And eventually, they'll wipe us out anyway. Daniel rubbed his temples, clearly torn. Building Solstice would take weeks, maybe months. We'd need engineers, materials, and a way to keep it hidden from the Voktar. And even then, it's a gamble. A gamble we have to take, Hale insisted. We've already started gathering people who can help. Scientists, technicians, soldiers, all volunteers. What we need from you, Carter, is your expertise. No one knows more about weapons like this than you do. Laura watched Daniel closely, seeing the conflict in his eyes. She knew how much he hated being pulled back into the world of war and destruction. But she also knew that deep down, he understood the stakes. Finally, he sighed. All right, I'll do what I can, but I'm not making any promises. Hale nodded, satisfied. Good enough. Now, let's get to work. As the group dispersed to begin planning, Laura stayed behind, watching Daniel as he stared at the blueprints spread across a table. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. No, he admitted, but sitting around won't save anyone. If we're going to fight, we need every advantage we can get. Before Laura could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. Red lights flashed, and shouts echoed in the hallway. A soldier burst into the room, panic in his voice. Sir, the Voktar are broadcasting another message. It's an ultimatum. Hale turned to a nearby monitor, where Commander Zerk's metallic face appeared once more. Humans, he intoned, his voice cold and unyielding. You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. Refuse, and we will reduce your cities to ash. Kneel before the Empire, or burn. The screen went black, leaving silence in its wake. Laura felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the clock was ticking. Whatever happened next, humanity's fate would be decided soon. The weight of the ultimatum hung heavy in the air. 24 hours. That was all they had to decide the fate of billions. General Hale wasted no time, barking orders to his team as maps and schematics were pulled up on screens. Engineers and technicians scrambled to prepare for the construction of Solstice, while soldiers reviewed defensive strategies that everyone knew might not be enough. Laura stood near the edge of the chaos, scribbling notes furiously in her journal. She wanted to capture every moment, not just for her story, but because she felt it was important to remember how humanity faced its darkest hour. Daniel, meanwhile, was buried in calculations. He pored over the blueprints of Solstice, muttering under his breath as he worked through the logistics. We'd need a power source strong enough to sustain the weapon, he said aloud. more to himself than anyone else, and even then, aiming it would be nearly impossible without precise targeting systems. Laura approached him cautiously. "Do you think we can do it? Finish it in time, I mean." He looked up at her, his face lined with exhaustion. "I don't know. Maybe. But even if we manage to build it, firing Solstice could have consequences none of us are ready for. It's not just about destroying the Voktar fleet. It's about what happens after. If we use something like this, we're telling the galaxy that Earth is willing to burn entire worlds to survive." "But isn't that better than letting them destroy us?" Laura asked. "Is it?" Daniel countered. "Every choice has a cost. The Eridani learned that the hard way. So did we. And now, here we are again, faced with the same question. How far are we willing to go to protect ourselves?" Before Laura could respond, one of the soldiers interrupted. "General Hale wants to see you both." They followed the soldier to a smaller room where Hale was seated at a table, surrounded by holographic projections of Earth's major cities. His expression was grim. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "One of our scouts intercepted a transmission from the Voktar fleet. They're planning to strike first, before the 24 hours are up." Daniel frowned. "How do you know?" "They mentioned specific targets," Hale explained. "New York, Tokyo, London, all major population centers. They're trying to break us before we can fight back." Laura felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What are we going to do?" "We evacuate as many people as we can," Hale replied. "But we can't save everyone. Not in time. Our best chance is to hit them before they hit us, which means finishing Solstice, and fast." Daniel shook his head. "Even if we speed things up, we'll still need at least 48 hours. Less if we cut corners, but that increases the risk of failure." Hale leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Daniel's. "Then we cut corners. We take the risk, because sitting here waiting for them to attack isn't an option." For a long moment, no one spoke. The gravity of the situation pressed down on all of them. Finally, Daniel nodded. "All right. I'll oversee the modifications, but I'll need help from both of you." Laura blinked in surprise. "Me? What can I do?" "You're good at getting information," Daniel said. "Talk to the engineers, the soldiers, anyone who might have ideas about how to speed things up. Write everything down. Sometimes solutions come from unexpected places." As they left the room, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time and options. In the hallway, she turned to Daniel. "Do you really think we can pull this off?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know one thing. If we don't try, we've already lost." Back in the main chamber, work intensified. Teams raced against the clock, welding metal, programming systems, and testing components. Laura moved among them, asking questions and jotting notes. She noticed how some workers paused to look at photos of loved ones taped to their stations. Others whispered prayers or muttered curses under their breath. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was a shared determination, a refusal to give up without a fight. As the hours ticked away, Laura found herself standing beside Daniel again. He was staring at a live feed of Earth from space, the alien ships casting long shadows over the planet. "Do you ever wonder," he said quietly, "if maybe we deserve this? All the wars, the destruction. Maybe the universe is tired of us." Laura placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe. But if that's true, then let's make sure we go out fighting. For every person who ever hoped for something better." Daniel didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. For the first time since this nightmare began, Laura felt a flicker of hope. Whatever happened next, they wouldn't face it alone. The hours slipped away far too quickly. The underground complex buzzed with frantic activity as engineers and technicians worked around the clock to assemble Solstice. Sparks flew from welding torches, and the hum of machinery filled the air. Daniel moved between workstations, checking progress and offering guidance where needed. His mind raced with calculations, possibilities, and worst-case scenarios. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of billions of lives. Laura stayed close, her notebook now filled with diagrams, equations, and snippets of conversations she'd overheard. She had surprised herself by how much she'd learned in such a short time. Terms like energy matrices and focal arrays were no longer foreign to her. More importantly, she had become a bridge between the workers, translating their concerns to Daniel and relaying his instructions back to them. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept things moving forward. As dawn approached, General Hale called everyone together for an update. The room fell silent as he stepped onto a makeshift platform. "Listen up," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We've made good progress, but we're not there yet. The Vokter will strike within the next 12 hours. If we don't finish Solstice before then, we'll have nothing to stop them." A murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the engineers raised his hand hesitantly. "Sir, what happens if we activate Solstice while it's still incomplete?" Hale glanced at Daniel, who took a deep breath before answering. "It could fail entirely, or worse, it could overload. If that happens, it might destabilize Earth's orbit, or even trigger a chain reaction in the Sun. We're talking about catastrophic damage on a planetary scale." The room grew quieter, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Laura looked around and saw fear etched on every face. These people weren't soldiers. They were scientists, builders, ordinary men and women thrust into an impossible situation. Yet none of them had walked away. "We can't think about failure," Hale said firmly. "Our job is to focus on success. Keep working, keep pushing, and trust that we're doing everything we can to protect this planet." After the meeting, Laura followed Daniel to a quiet corner of the facility. He leaned against a wall, rubbing his temples. "You holding up okay?" she asked gently. He gave her a tired smile. "I've been better, but thanks for asking." She hesitated, then spoke her mind. "Do you think we're making the right choice? Building something so destructive, doesn't it feel wrong?" Daniel sighed. "Of course it does, but war isn't about right or wrong. It's about survival. I've seen what happens when we hesitate, when we let fear paralyze us. This weapon might save us, or it might destroy us. Either way, it's the only chance we've got." Before Laura could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed, and shouts echoed down the corridors. A soldier ran into the room, panic in his voice. "General, the Vokter are moving, earlier than expected." Everyone sprang into action. Monitors displayed images of alien ships breaking formation and heading toward Earth. Cities across the globe went dark as power grids failed under mysterious surges. Panic spread worldwide as people realized the attack was imminent. Hale gathered his team in the command center. "They're targeting New York first," he said grimly. "We need to buy ourselves more time. Activate the decoys." Decoys, small satellites equipped with fake energy signatures designed to mimic Solstice's activation, were launched into orbit. Their purpose was simple: trick the Vokter into thinking Earth was ready to fight back. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. As the decoys deployed, the alien fleet paused, clearly confused. For a brief moment, hope flickered in the hearts of those watching below. But Daniel knew it wouldn't last long. The Vokter would figure out the ruse soon enough. "We've bought ourselves maybe 2 hours," he told Hale. "That's all." "2 hours is enough," Hale replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Get Solstice online." Back in the main chamber, the final pieces of the weapon were being assembled. Engineers shouted orders, their hands trembling as they connected wires and calibrated systems. Laura stayed by Daniel's side, helping wherever she could. Despite the chaos, she felt a strange sense of purpose. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for everyone who called Earth home. Finally, a technician called out, "It's ready." Daniel turned to Laura, his eyes reflecting both determination and doubt. "This is it," he said softly. "Let's hope we didn't make a mistake." The countdown began. 2 hours. That was all the time they had left to finish preparing Solstice and fire it before the Voktar fleet realized the decoys were a trick. The tension in the underground facility was suffocating. Engineers scrambled to double-check every connection, every system, knowing that one mistake could mean disaster. Daniel stood at the control panel, his hands hovering over the switches as he ran through the activation sequence in his mind. Laura stayed close, her heart pounding in her chest. She watched as sweat dripped down Daniel's face, his eyes scanning the monitors for any sign of trouble. "Are you sure this will work?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "No," Daniel admitted without looking at her, "but we don't have another option." General Hale paced nearby, his radio crackling with updates from scouts monitoring the Voktar movements. "They're moving again," he announced grimly, "heading straight for New York. We've got less than an hour now." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then we need to act fast. Everyone, clear the area around Solstice. If something goes wrong, I don't want anyone else getting hurt." The workers hesitated but obeyed, retreating to safer parts of the facility. Only Daniel, Laura, and a small team of engineers remained in the main chamber. The air felt heavier with each passing second, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. As the final checks were completed, Daniel turned to Laura. "You should go too, just in case." She shook her head firmly. "I'm staying. You're not doing this alone." For a moment, Daniel looked like he might argue, but then he simply nodded. There wasn't time to debate. He turned back to the controls and took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." He flipped the first switch, and the room hummed with energy as Solstice powered up. Lights flickered across the panels, and the massive device in the center of the chamber began to glow faintly. It was working, but slowly, too slowly. Suddenly, alarms blared again. One of the engineers shouted, "Sir, we got a problem. Power levels are spiking." Daniel cursed under his breath and rushed to the console. His fingers flew over the keys as he tried to stabilize the system. "It's overheating," he yelled. "We need to vent the excess energy or it'll explode." "Can we redirect it?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "We can try," Daniel replied, pulling up a schematic of the facility. He pointed to a series of vents designed to release pressure during tests. "If we reroute the energy there, it might buy us some time." Without hesitation, two engineers grabbed tools and ran to the vents, working to manually override the safety locks. Meanwhile, Daniel fought to keep Solstice stable, his focus absolute despite the chaos around him. Just as the engineers managed to open the vents, a loud crash echoed through the facility. The ground shook, and dust rained from the ceiling. Someone shouted, "They found us. The Voktar are attacking the surface." Hale's voice came over the radio, strained but determined. "Hold your positions. Reinforcements are en route." Daniel ignored the commotion, focusing solely on Solstice. "Come on," he muttered, his eyes glued to the readings. Slowly, the power level stabilized. "We're almost there." Laura gripped the edge of the console, watching as the timer ticked down. 30 minutes left. 20. 10. Finally, the machine roared to life, its core glowing brighter and brighter. Daniel turned to the team. "Stand by to fire. Aim for the center of their fleet. It's our best chance to take them out." But before he could give the order, another explosion rocked the facility. This one was closer, collapsing part of the ceiling and sending debris flying. Laura ducked instinctively, shielding her head. When she looked up, she saw smoke filling the room, and a figure stepping through the wreckage. It was Senator Richard Cole, a man infamous for his ties to corporate interests and shady deals. In his hand, he held a data chip, the same one containing the plans for Solstice. "It's over," he said coldly, tossing the chip to a group of armed guards who accompanied him. "I've already sent the designs to the Voktar. They know what we're planning." Betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. Daniel stared at Cole, disbelief warring with anger. "Why would you do this?" Cole smirked. "Because surrendering is better than dying. Once they see we're willing to cooperate, they'll spare us." "You idiot," Daniel spat. "They won't stop until we're wiped out." Before anyone could react, gunfire erupted. The guards opened fire, forcing the team to scatter. Laura grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward an emergency exit. "We have to go," she urged. Reluctantly, he followed, glancing back at Solstice one last time. As they fled into the tunnels below, the sound of explosions grew louder. Above them, the facility crumbled, burying their hope beneath tons of rubble. Yet even as they ran, Daniel couldn't shake the thought. Solstice wasn't lost, not yet, and neither was humanity's chance to fight back. The tunnels were dark and narrow, the air thick with dust, and the smell of burning metal. Daniel and Laura stumbled through them, their footsteps echoing as they tried to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the collapsing facility. Behind them, the sound of explosions grew fainter, but the weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on their shoulders. Betrayed, outnumbered, out of time. Laura coughed, waving a hand in front of her face to clear the smoke that clung to the air. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice strained. "There's an old transport station up ahead," Daniel replied, his tone clipped. "If we can reach it, we might be able to get to Artemis Station." "Artemis," Laura repeated, confused. "Isn't that the lunar base?" "Yes," Daniel said. "It's our backup plan. Or at least it was supposed to be. If Senator Cole betrayed us, there's no telling how much information he gave the Vokhtar. We need to assume they know about Solstice, and that means they'll come for anything else we've prepared." Laura nodded, though her mind raced with questions. How could someone like Cole justify handing humanity's secrets over to the enemy? What kind of person would choose surrender over survival? She didn't have answers, but she knew one thing. They couldn't let his betrayal stop them. After what felt like hours, they reached the transport station, a small forgotten outpost buried deep beneath the city. The room was dimly lit, its equipment covered in layers of dust. In the center stood a single shuttle, its sleek design suggesting it had once been part of Earth's emergency evacuation fleet. Daniel approached it cautiously, checking for damage or sabotage. "It's still operational," he announced after a quick inspection. "But we'll need clearance codes to launch." Laura frowned. "Do you think General Hale made it out?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But if anyone survived, they'll head for Artemis too. Let's hope they beat us there." As they climbed aboard the shuttle, Laura noticed something on the dashboard, a blinking red light. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. Daniel leaned closer, his expression hardening. "A tracking beacon. Someone must have activated it before abandoning this place. Can we disable it?" "We don't have time," he said. "If we stay here any longer, the Vokhtar will find us. We'll have to risk it." With no other choice, Daniel powered up the engines and initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle shuddered as it rose into the air, breaking through the tunnel ceiling and emerging into the chaos above. The sky was filled with smoke and fire, alien ships descending like vultures toward the ruins of the facility. Lasers streaked across the horizon, striking buildings and setting entire neighborhoods ablaze. Laura gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles white. "They're destroying everything." "They're trying to break us," Daniel said grimly. "If they can make us afraid enough, we'll give up without a fight." "But we're not giving up," Laura said firmly, surprising even herself with her resolve. "We're not." Daniel glanced at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "No, we're not." The journey to Artemis Station was tense. The shuttle's tracking beacon drew unwanted attention, forcing Daniel to perform evasive maneuvers as Vokhtar fighters pursued them. Each near miss left Laura's heart racing, but somehow they managed to slip past their attackers and enter lunar orbit. When they finally landed at Artemis, they were greeted by a scene of organized chaos. Refugees from Earth crowded the halls, while soldiers and engineers worked tirelessly to fortify the base. Among them was Captain Elena Torres, a fierce woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. She approached Daniel and Laura as soon as they disembarked. "You're Carter, right?" she asked, wasting no time on pleasantries. "General Hale told us you'd be coming. He said you'd know what to do next." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Laura. "I'm not sure I do," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out, together." Elena nodded. "Good, because whatever happens next, we're counting on you." For the first time since the invasion began, Daniel allowed himself a moment of hope. They weren't alone. Humanity wasn't defeated, not yet. And as long as there were people willing to fight, there was still a chance to turn the tide. The interior of Artemis Station buzzed with activity. Engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged systems, while soldiers patrolled the corridors, their faces tense but determined. Refugees huddled in makeshift shelters, sharing stories of narrow escapes and lost loved ones. The mood was grim, but there was an undercurrent of defiance, a refusal to give up, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Daniel and Laura followed Captain Elena Torres through the crowded halls toward a secure command center. Along the way, Daniel noticed remnants of humanity's interstellar colonies gathering forces. Pilots from distant outposts, scientists from research stations, and even civilians who had fled earlier conflicts were all pitching in. It was a patchwork army, but it was theirs. Inside the command center, General Hale waited. His uniform was disheveled, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with resolve. "Carter," he said as they entered, "I'm glad you made it." "Barely," Daniel replied, pulling up a chair. "Senator Cole betrayed us. He gave the Vokhtar everything. Solstice, our plans, probably even this location." Hale cursed under his breath. "We suspected something when communications went dark. Looks like we underestimated how deep the rot goes." Laura stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "What's our next move? If they know about Solstice, they'll expect us to try again." "That's exactly why we're going to use that against them," Daniel said, leaning over a holographic map of the solar system. "They think they've won, that we're scrambling to rebuild or regroup. But what if we show them otherwise?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "You mean hit them where it hurts?" "Exactly," Daniel continued. "We'll send decoy ships equipped with false readings of Solstice's activation sequence. Make them think we're preparing to fire again. While they focus on hunting down the decoys, we'll launch a counterattack using smaller, faster vessels." Hale nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it could work. We'll need volunteers for the decoy fleet." "I'll lead it," Elena said without hesitation. "My squadron is ready." "You'll be walking into a trap," Daniel warned, "if they catch on." "Then we'll make sure they don't," Elena interrupted. "Besides, someone has to buy you time to finish whatever plan you're cooking up." As the group finalized their strategy, Laura watched silently, taking notes and observing the dynamics between them. She admired their courage, but she couldn't shake the feeling that sacrifices lay ahead. Sacrifices she wasn't sure everyone would survive. Later, as Daniel worked with engineers to modify the remaining shuttles for the decoy mission, Laura approached him. "Do you really think this will work?" she asked softly. "It has to," Daniel replied, his voice heavy with determination. "We can't let them win. Not like this." Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A soldier burst into the room, panic in his voice. "Sir, the Vokhtar are moving. They're heading straight for us." Everyone sprang into action. Elena and her pilots rushed to their ships, engines roaring to life as they prepared to launch. Meanwhile, Daniel and his team scrambled to upload the fake activation signals onto the decoy vessels. As the first wave of Vokhtar fighters descended upon Artemis, the decoy fleet launched, drawing the enemy's attention away from the moon. Laser fire lit up the darkness of space, and explosions erupted as the two sides clashed. From the safety of the command center, Laura watched the battle unfold on monitors, her heart pounding with every flash of light. "They're taking the bait," Hale said, relief evident in his voice. "Keep them busy, Tories. Buy us every second you can. Alina's voice crackled over the comms. Don't worry, General. We'll hold them off. Back in the engineering bay, Daniel worked furiously to recalibrate one of the last functional weapon systems. This might be our only shot, he muttered to himself. We can't waste it. Outside, the fight raged on. Alina's squadron darted through the chaos, luring the Vokhtar fleet farther and farther away from Earth and from Artemis. Though outnumbered, their pilots fought with unmatched skill and bravery, buying precious time for those still hidden on the lunar base. As the battle reached its peak, Daniel turned to Laura. Get to the control room. You'll need to document this. If we fail, someone needs to know what happened here. She hesitated, then nodded. Be careful. You too, he said, giving her a small, tired smile. With the decoy fleet holding the line, the stage was set for the final phase of humanity's desperate gamble. Whether it would succeed or end in disaster remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Earth's defenders weren't going down without a fight. The command center of Artemis Station was alive with tension. Monitors displayed the ongoing battle between Alina's decoy fleet and the Vokhtar armée. Explosions lit up the screens, each flash representing lives lost and ships destroyed. Laura sat at a console, her fingers trembling as she recorded every detail. She knew these moments would define humanity's legacy, if they survived. Daniel stood nearby, his focus entirely on the weapon system he had been modifying. It wasn't Solstice, not fully, but it was close enough to serve as a last-ditch effort. The device, nicknamed Phoenix, was designed to mimic Solstice's destructive potential by channeling energy from the sun and focusing it into a concentrated beam. If successful, it could cripple the Vokhtar fleet. If it failed, Daniel didn't let himself finish that thought. General Hale paced behind him, watching the battle unfold on the monitors. How much longer? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. Minutes, Daniel replied, his hands moving quickly over the controls. We need to time this perfectly. If we fire too soon, they'll dodge it. Too late, and we'll miss our chance. Laura glanced at the clock. Alina's squadron was holding their own, but the Vokhtar were relentless. Ships on both sides were being torn apart, debris floating like confetti in the void of space. Over the comms, Alina's voice crackled through, strained but determined. They're falling for it. Keep them distracted. Daniel nodded to himself, muttering under his breath. Just a little longer. Suddenly, an explosion erupted on one of the screens, larger than the others. Laura gasped as she recognized the ship. It was Alina's flagship. Static filled the comms before her voice came through again, weaker this time. We've taken heavy damage, but the plan worked. They're chasing us away from Artemis. Finish this, Carter. Daniel clenched his jaw, anger and grief warring within him. He forced himself to focus. All right, everyone, brace yourselves. This is it. He turned to General Hale. We need to activate Phoenix now. Once it fires, there's no turning back. Hale nodded grimly. Do it. With a deep breath, Daniel flipped the final switch. The machine roared to life, its core glowing brighter and brighter as it drew energy from the nearby sun. Alarms blared throughout the station, warning of the immense power building within the device. On the monitors, the Vokhtar fleet began to regroup, realizing too late that they had been lured into a trap. Laura gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes glued to the screens. It's working, she whispered. They're right in the path of the beam. But just as Daniel prepared to fire, another problem arose. A red warning flashed across the control panel. Overload detected, he shouted. The system can't handle this much energy. What do we do? Hale demanded. Daniel hesitated for only a moment before making a decision. I'll stay here and manually stabilize the system. Someone else needs to fire the weapon. No, Laura protested, standing up. You can't stay. I have to, Daniel interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. If I don't, none of this matters. Trust me. Before she could argue further, General Hale stepped forward. I'll do it. You two get out of here." Daniel shook his head. "Sir, with all due respect, you're needed elsewhere." "Laura, go with him." Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but she nodded reluctantly. "Be careful," she said, her voice breaking. As Laura and Hale left the room, Daniel turned back to the controls. His hands moved swiftly, adjusting settings and rerouting power to prevent the overload from destroying the entire station. Sweat dripped down his face, and his heart raced, but he didn't falter. Outside, the Voktar fleet loomed closer, their weapons charging for what would likely be a devastating strike. Finally, Daniel gave the order. "Fire." The beams shot out from Artemis Station, a blinding streak of light that cut through space like a knife. It struck the center of the Voktar formation, obliterating dozens of ships in an instant. The remaining vessels scattered, their once imposing fleet reduced to chaos. Back in the safety of the command center, Laura watched the aftermath, tears streaming down her face. She knew Daniel wouldn't make it out alive. As the station trembled from the aftershock of the blast, she whispered a silent thank you to the man who had given everything to save them. The Voktar were retreating, their forces decimated. Humanity had won. For now. But as the dust settled, Laura couldn't help but feel the weight of the sacrifice that had made it possible. Months passed, and the scars of war remained etched across Earth and its people. Cities once vibrant with life now lay in ruins, their streets empty save for cleanup crews working tirelessly to rebuild. The sky above was clearer now, free from the shadow of alien ships that had once loomed like harbingers of doom. Humanity had survived, but survival came at a cost. Laura sat in her small apartment, staring at the stack of papers on her desk. It was her manuscript, titled *Kneel Before the Empire. Humans burned their worlds to dust *. Each page carried the weight of what she had witnessed, the bravery of those who fought, the sacrifices made, and the fragile hope that lingered amidst the ashes. She knew publishing it would stir emotions. Some would see it as a story of triumph, others as a cautionary tale. But she also knew it needed to be told. Future generations deserved to remember. In the weeks following the battle, Laura had thrown herself into documenting everything. She interviewed survivors, transcribed recordings, and pieced together fragments of the conflict. But there was one voice missing, one story left untold. Daniel's. His final moments aboard Artemis Station haunted her dreams. She often wondered if he had found peace in those last seconds, knowing his actions had saved billions. One evening, she received an invitation to speak at a memorial ceremony honoring those who had fallen. The event was held in New Chicago, where the underground archive had been destroyed during the early days of the invasion. Thousands gathered under a cold winter sky, their faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. General Hale stood beside her, his expression somber but proud. He had become a symbol of resilience, leading Earth's unified council as humanity worked to heal its wounds. When it was Laura's turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, her hands trembling slightly. "We lost so much," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Friends, family, homes, all gone because we refused to kneel. But in losing, we also gained something precious. Proof that we are stronger than fear, stronger than despair. People like Daniel Carter showed us that even when all seems lost, courage can light the way." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd. As she spoke, images of Daniel, Elena, and countless others flashed on large screens behind her, faces of heroes who had given everything. The applause that followed was not just for them, but for every person still fighting to rebuild. After the ceremony, Laura walked alone through the quiet streets, her breath visible in the frosty air. She felt a sense of closure, though the pain of loss would always linger. Rebuilding Earth wouldn't happen overnight. Old divisions still simmered beneath the surface, and trust between nations remained fragile. Yet, for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel hope. Back at her apartment, she opened her laptop and began typing again. This time, she wrote about the future, a vision of humanity united, exploring the stars not as conquerors, but as explorers seeking understanding. She imagined children growing up without the shadow of war, learning about the sacrifices made so they could live in peace. As she typed the final sentence, she smiled softly. Daniel's legacy lived on, not just in her words, but in the determination of those who refused to give up. Humanity had burned worlds to dust, yes, but it had also risen from the ashes, ready to forge a new path among the stars. And maybe, just maybe, this time they would get it right.